welcome back. We're continuing on in chapter 1. We're on page 16 and we're going to go through page 19. We're going to talk about ways that the animals survive in their environment. I have a picture I want to show you, and I want to see if you can find the organism in this picture. And I'm not going to tell you what kind of organism it is, but it is an organism. It is a living thing. But I want to see if you can find it. I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to find it. Okay, if you haven't figured it out yet, if you look right here, there's a soldier right here. He's laying down and he has a gun pointed out towards somewhere. But this is a soldier, and it's very hard to see him because he's blended in with the rocks. He's wearing what we call camouflage. And camouflage, this is really important for a soldier, because if he didn't wear camouflage, he could be easily seen by an enemy if two countries are at war, and he could get easily killed. So he has to blend in or look the same as his environment to keep him safe. So that's one of our vocabulary words today. It's camouflage. Let's say that, camouflage. Another one we're going to talk about is adaptation. Let's say that, adaptation. The third one on our list is called mimicry. Mimicry. The fourth one, migrate. Migrate. The last one we're going to talk about, hibernation. One more time, hibernation. And all 5 of these words are ways for animals and other organisms to survive in their environment. And God blessed them with these different abilities because he wanted to protect them. So let's go ahead and read through our book today, and I'll explain each of these words to us. Okay, we're on page 16. Follow along as I read, please. When God created the world, he created a perfect environment. God provided all the needs of Adam and Eve and other living things to be completely met. But because of the fall of mankind, sin entered or came into the world. Living things no longer had a perfect environment. Noah's flood changed the conditions or the environment of the earth even more. It became more difficult for living things to meet their needs in their new environment. However, God created plants, animals, and people with the ability to change. That's a key word. As conditions or their environment changes. Living things cannot change to become other living things, but often they can adapt or change to new conditions. An adaptation is a change in a characteristic of a living thing that allows it to survive in its environment. An adaptation may be a physical characteristic or may be a skill or behavior. A physical characteristic can be the thickness of an animal's fur or the shape of a plant's flower. How an animal hunts for food or builds a shelter or home for protection are examples of skills or behaviors. So let's talk about that word. Let's say that with me, adaptation. And it'd be a good idea to highlight that in your book. And you want to look at the root word. The root word is adapt. Adapt. And adapt, if you're not sure what the key word was, adapt means change, or the ability to change. And sometimes animals or any kind of organism will need to change because their environment changes. For instance, for example, when it's winter time, what do you wear extra over your clothing? You wear a coat, a winter coat to keep your body warm. But in the summertime, would you wear that same winter coat? No. Why? The environment changed. The temperature raised. And remember, temperature is a part of the environment. It's a non-living thing. So we wouldn't wear that winter coat in the summer. Why? It's too hot. We have to adapt or change because our environment changes. Another example, if you have a pet, a dog or a cat, sometimes, depending on the season, whether it's warm or cold, their fur will change. For instance, a dog's fur will get thicker, or most animals, if they have fur, will get thicker or they will grow more hair. And then in the summertime, because it's too hot, they will lose a lot of that extra fur. Otherwise, their body will stay too hot. So their bodies will change or adapt to the environment. That's called a physical change, or it's changing their physical characteristic. Physical is talking about their body. Maybe an animal's behavior will change. If they run out of a resource or a food, they will either have to find a new environment to live in or change what they eat. Or maybe they have to change how they hunt. That is a skill or behavior that they have to change. So, what is the key word when we're talking about adaptation? Change. It means a change because their environment changed. They have to change. Now, do they change into a new animal? No. We don't have that. They reproduce or make new babies that are going to look like the parents. They don't, monkeys will never have birds as their babies. They won't make a new kind, but they can change if their environment changes. Another good example would be a chameleon. It's a kind of lizard. Depending on what the color of their environment is, and even some patterns, the chameleon will change the color of its skin to match its environment. That's an adaptation. Let's continue on in our book on page 16. Camouflage. Some living things are hard to see. They blend in with their surroundings. This blending is called camouflage. God provided many animals with the ability to camouflage to help them survive or live in their environment. Their colors and patterns can look much like their surroundings, like the chameleon we talked about. Even when they're not hiding, they may be difficult to see. Let's go on to the next page, page 17. The fawns of some deer, or the baby deer, have spotted fur. Their spotted coats help the young deer blend or mix with their environment. Blend in with the plants and patchy light of the forest. This camouflage helps protect the fawn while it is too young to escape running. So when you're talking about a deer, they get scared very easily, and if they hear a noise that sounds dangerous, they will run, and they can run really fast. But if they have babies with them, those babies cannot run very fast. So God gave the babies a way to protect themselves because of their fur. They've got spotted fur that helps to blend in with their environment. You can see a picture of this on page 17. So camouflage means that they can hide well in their environment. It's very, very difficult to see. Let's continue on with the word mimicry. Let's continue on page 17. Some kinds of animals are protected by mimicry. Mimicry is looking like another living thing. Some jumping spiders mimic ants. These spiders hold their front legs up to look like an ant's antenna. Jumping spiders also walk like an ant rather than a spider. The ants taste bad to many animals. The spider's mimicry helps it avoid being eaten. Sometimes a harmless animal looks like one that is harmful. Many brightly colored tree frogs found in the Amazon rainforest are poisonous. Other animals avoid eating them. But some harmless, or they won't hurt you, tree frogs look like the poisonous tree frogs. This helped the harmless frogs not to be eaten, since they look like they would be harmful. Okay, so mimicry, you can think of the word, you're going to go back to the root word in this. The root word is mimic, or to copy. Mimic means to copy. And you can remember, this is when two animals look almost the same. I'll say it again. Two animals look almost the same. And what happens in this situation, usually there's a very dangerous or very poisonous organism, and then you have one that's mimicking or doing mimicry or copying that animal, and it looks almost the same, but this one is not poisonous or not harmful. And so it's a way of God giving these animals a way to protect themselves from being eaten. So I have some pictures I'm going to show you, and you tell me whether or not this is mimicry or if it is camouflage. Mimicry or camouflage. So remember, camouflage is hard to see. Mimicry is usually two animals that look the same. Right? So the first one, is this mimicry or camouflage? If you guess mimicry, that's correct. The top one is the coral snake. And you can see the pattern here. There's a little poem on this card that will tell you which one is poisonous and which one is not. The top one is poisonous. The bottom one is not poisonous. It says, red and yellow kill a fellow, meaning it's got poison. And the yellow is touching the red. And then you have the king snake, which is red and black, venom lack, meaning there's no poison. So you can see the pattern here, the black is touching the red. So you can remember this poem and know whether or not it's a poisonous snake or a not poisonous snake. But animals stay away from this one because they think it's this one. All right. How about this one? Again, if you guess mimicry, that's correct. The top one is the monarch butterfly, the viceroy, and then the bottom one is the monarch, the one that we think of when we think of this kind of butterfly. Monarch and then the viceroy. But the pattern looks so much alike, it's almost hard to tell a difference. Can you see some differences between the two butterflies? They are different, but they look awfully the same. Now, birds don't eat this one very often because they think it's this one, and this one tastes bad to them. So this one is protected because it looks like the monarch. All right, I'm going to go a little faster with some of these other ones. Can you see this one? If you guess camouflage, that's correct. If you cannot see, there is a frog right here, and he's blending in with this environment. It's very hard to see him. Okay, I have another one. Can you see the organism in the picture? Yes, this is camouflage, and if you look right here, there's an owl that has blended in with the tree. It looks almost like the bark of the tree. Camouflage. Okay, here. These look like two bees, but actually the bottom one is a bee, and this one is a fly. Okay, so what did we call this? Mimicry. All right. Can you see the animal? What did we call this? Camouflage. Why? Because he's hard to see, but you can see his face right here. He's hiding in those tall grasses. This one's a little tricky. We call this mimicry. Why? Because the shape here on the moth's wings, or the butterfly's wings, looks similar to an owl's eyes. And so some animals are very scared of owls and they'll run away and won't eat this butterfly. Here's another example of mimicry. The bottom one we're very familiar with. This is the cobra. But this one is not a cobra, but it looks very similar, but it's not dangerous. It might bite you, but it's not poisonous. And so animals think, ooh, it's the bad cobra. I'm going to stay away. So this one doesn't get eaten. Okay? Is that camouflage or mimicry? Now, if you said camouflage, you're correct. And right here is a baby deer. He's hiding, like we said in our book. Okay. I'm going to cover the names of these. Now, we know which one of these are. It's a ladybug. But the other one is a spider. Do you know which one is the spider? It's actually this top one. This one is a spider. But since it looks like the ladybug, birds don't like to eat it. So this one stays safe. But it's a spider, not an insect. And the last one. Is that camouflage or mimicry? If you guess camouflage, You are correct. And right here is a lizard, and here is another lizard. He looks like the leaves on the ground, and so therefore it's very hard for you to see him. And other animals have a hard time seeing him as well. All right, very good. Let's continue on. Talking a little bit more about mimicry. In your book, you have the picture of an ant. And then there's a picture of a spider. Do you know which one is the spider and which one the ant? Well, if you guess the top one is the spider. And if you count, he does have 8 legs. But he does something very strange with these front legs. He puts them up above his head, so it looks like antenna, because spiders don't have antenna. And he also walks like the ant, and he doesn't walk like a spider. So he tastes bad, this ant, and so birds won't eat this spider because it looks like this ant. So mimicry, when you have 2 organisms that look the same. All right, let's go ahead and look on page 18, please. We're going to continue on in our reading. Other defenses. Camouflage and mimicry help some animals hide, but hiding is not the only way animals are protected. Animals also have other defenses or ways to protect themselves. God gave a few animals their own armor. An adult armadillo, like in your book, has a flexible, hard shell on its back. This shell protects the armadillo from animals that may want to eat it. Animals may fight to protect themselves from other animals. Deer use their antlers for fighting. Some cattle or cows and wild sheep use horns, and zebras and mules can protect themselves by kicking with their hard hooves. Other animals use their teeth or their claws. Some birds, such as the hawk and eagle, defend themselves with their sharp beaks and their talons. God gave porcupines an unusual defense system. Porcupines are covered with spiky hairs called quills. The quills have barbed points at the end. If an animal gets too close to the porcupine can use its tail to slap the animal. Some of its quills stick into the attacking animal. The porcupine then grows new quills to replace the ones it lost. All right, so not all animals have camouflage or mimicry, but God did give all animals a way to protect themselves. Even plants, they have ways of protecting themselves too. But we'll talk about that in chapter 3. For instance, it mentions the armadillo. There's a picture here, and it's covered with a shell similar to a turtle. But with an armadillo, their shell is a bit flexible. But it's really, really hard to eat that animal because of its shell. Deer and cattle or cows or wild sheep, they have horns that can help to protect them. Some animals kick because they have really, really hard feet or hooves. Other animals, they have very, very sharp teeth like the tiger, or they have very sharp claws, and they can cut through an animal that's trying to attack them. Another one that mentions the eagle and the hawk. They have very, very sharp beaks that can tear through meat and flesh. And their talons are very, very long and very sharp like knives. So it's a way of defending themselves. Also, many of them use their claws to grab food, but they do protect themselves with their talons. Now you see here, there's a porcupine in your book. Now those porcupines, you don't want to play with them, and some dogs, they don't learn. They're so curious about finding other animals, that they will attack these poor porcupines, and they're just protecting themselves, and quills get stuck in the dog's mouth. And if you look on Google and just type dog with quills, you'll get so many pictures of these poor dogs who lost the battle when fighting against a porcupine. And it's very painful. The vet has to pull all of those quills out. And something else about these quills, I'm going to draw it over here. They're kind of shaped like this, kind of like a needle. Okay, very fine point. But on the end, there's these sharp barbs. I don't know if you can see that from here, but they're sharp things, kind of like thorns on a rose, that on the end of a quill on a porcupine. And so it goes in really easily, but it's really hard and painful to pull that out. So don't mess with the porcupine. You'll lose. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the last two ways God protects them. All right, migration. Animals may migrate or move from one place to another. Most animals migrate to find food and water. Often they migrate as the seasons change. In Africa, many animals migrate to find food and water they need during the dry season. Some animals migrate great distances. The Arctic tern is a bird that travels farther than any other animal. The tern travels, take it from the Arctic to Antarctica and back again each year. Hibernation. Not all animals migrate when the seasons change. Some animals hibernate or go into a deep sleep during the cold winter months. Animals that hibernate sleep through part or all of the winter. An animal that hibernates usually eats large amounts of food in the summer and autumn. The extra food is stored as body fat. This fat provides energy for the animal during hibernation. Okay, so the last two words that we're talking about, migrate and hibernation. So migrate, hibernation. So migrate, an easy word to remember what this means is to move. Okay? Move. Remember, these are all adaptations or ways to protect themselves, but migrate means to move. Now, sometimes they move because there's no more food and water in their environment. They have to change new environments. But many times you can think of a bird, they will fly from the north to the south where it is warmer because winter is coming or the weather is getting cooler. So they have to change their environment or where they live. And birds, they fly great distances sometimes to get to a place where it's warm. But then when the seasons change again, when the weather is warmer in their original home, they will fly back to their original home. One that is mentioned here, it's called the Arctic tern. There's a picture in your book on page 19, and it shows you the pattern it flies. And this is a very long distance for one bird to follow. And it will do this in a year's time. They'll go from the top of the earth to the bottom of the earth, and then back up to the top of the earth again. So this animal has the longest migration route. And many times in Africa it mentions animals will have to migrate to a new environment because there is no more food and water because of the dry season. Many places like in Africa, because it's a jungle area, or places like India, they only have 2 seasons. They have a wet and a dry season. Now here in Korea, also many places in America, there are 4 seasons: winter, spring, summer, and fall. But in these places like the jungle or in India, places like that where it's really, really hot and humid, there's only 2 seasons. And during the wet season, it will rain a lot. And during that time, especially people, they will collect that water, that rainwater, so they can use it during the dry season. During the dry season, there's not a lot of rain, and so food does not grow very well during that time. So they have to think ahead and prepare during the wet season so they can survive in the dry season. So because of this, many animals have to move to a new environment. Hibernation, this is the last one we're going to talk about today. I also have one extra word that I'm going to share with you that I'll write on the board. Hibernation means that some animals, they go into a very, very deep sleep, and it would be very, very hard to wake them up. Their body naturally goes into this sleep. And what happened, brain activity, their heart, all slows down. The blood that circulates through their body slows down, and they use very, very little energy. It almost looks like the animal is dead because their breathing is really, really slow. But how do they survive all 3 months just sleeping? Wouldn't somebody usually die if they didn't eat for 3 months? Well, God made them to remember, I've got to eat during the summer and during the fall time. And they eat and they eat and they eat and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And they store that fat in their body. And then while they're sleeping, their body uses that fat. It's actually called stored energy. And that way, during the wintertime, they survive. So very rarely do they wake up during the winter. All right, so I said there was one extra word I wanted to share with you. So hibernation means they sleep during the winter time. But there's an extra word I want to share with you. It's called okay, it's called estivation. Can you say that with me? Estivation. Now, remember, hibernation means they sleep during the winter time. But estivation, there's some animals that sleep during the summertime, just like some that would sleep in the winter. But because the temperature is too hot for their body, they may go into the ground where it's cooler and sleep during the summer months. So estivation is sleeping during the summer. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our lesson. There are 2 questions on here that I would like you to answer. Also, in your activity manual, there are pages 13, 14, 15, and 16 that will go with this lesson. I want you to finish that for me. See you next time.